Today, we're going to be diving into iron. It's a very common blood test that's done, but unfortunately, sometimes when getting blood work and things like that done, this is a particular area that sometimes gets overlooked to where not always the full panel gets done. And so while it may appear quote unquote normal in the results that come through, there may be a little bit more of a nuance, a little bit of a deeper level to dive into to really make sure that there isn't something underlying that could be impacting your performance. So, to kick things off, to be able to kind of see what areas iron may actually be impacting you, little self assessment. Do any of these sound familiar? Have you been noticing legs feeling heavier in the second half, a little bit more than they should? Has your recovery been taking a little bit longer to where just kind of that soreness and that fatigue just doesn't go away? Have you noticed the speed and explosiveness kind of having plateaued or even started to dip despite all that training, despite all that effort? The progress doesn't seem to be matching with it. Have you been feeling flat going into the training, even after a full night's sleep, where you slept great, you feel like you should be nice and fresh going, but as soon as you step out on the field to try and get things going, you just can't hit that next gear and it just kind of, again, falls flat? Have you noticed cognitively kind of thinking a little bit slower? Those decision making moments haven't been quite as sharp, quite as quick. If you're on the field, you haven't been able to make that quick action quite as easily. If any of these have sounded familiar, perhaps there's a chance your iron may be at play, and it's definitely worth looking into. So when we talk about iron, a big thing is it's not just a health marker. So anytime that we go in for blood work, if we do that annual blood test, which I hope everybody is doing, iron's one of those things where sometimes we're just like, okay, yeah, it's a general checkup. You got the iron, cholesterol, your A1C numbers and things like that. Check, check, check. But there's going to be a pretty big performance impact when it comes to making sure that your iron is on point. Because a lot of things that it's going to impact are things that directly impact your performance. The biggest one being your oxygen transport. Oxygen is going to fuel every aspect of the body. Iron is what helps bind that oxygen and delivers that oxygen throughout the body. So if we are low in iron, we're not going to be able to deliver as much oxygen. And so if we're getting less oxygen in, yeah, the performance is going to suffer. And so that being kind of like that key factor, if that isn't occurring, we're not going to be able to fuel our efforts, to be able to fuel our exercise, to be able to fuel our body just to do those things. Because every aspect, when it comes to energy production, it requires some oxygen. Now, yes, some intense activities you're able to do without oxygen for the anaerobic piece, but not for a long time. And to be able to get that energy back, you need oxygen to be able to regenerate it. Oxygen is going to be at play every single time. So if you want to fuel your body to be able to go and perform, you need oxygen. It's also going to impact your mental sharpness. Again, I don't care who you are. If you take away the oxygen, I'm not going to be thinking as clearly, and neither will you. So making sure that you have adequate iron, adequate oxygen delivery, it's going to support your ability to focus and make proper decisions, both in your day-to-day as well as on the field during competition. It's also going to be very key in overall recovery and immunity. If our iron is low, that soreness is just going to linger. You're not going to bounce back as well. You're going to notice yourself getting sick a little bit more frequently. So if we don't have our iron on point, there's a whole cascade of things that is going to negatively be impacting the body, and we don't want that to be happening. Now, how common is that though? And this is something where there's a ton of research out there, all sorts of different studies, but these are some of the big ones. When looking at how common iron deficiency is, we get a full spectrum to where in some studies you're going to see 1 in 5 competitive athletes are going to be iron deficient. This is going to include males and females in the study, but then as we focus on females in particular, what we're really going to notice is an increase in this iron deficiency aspect of things. Female athletes are going to be at about a 4 times greater risk of iron deficiency than male athletes. And in some studies that look at athletes specifically, in one study, 57% of the female soccer players that they looked at were iron deficient. In another one, looking at some youth players between 11 and 18, over 53% had iron deficiency. So across the board, iron deficiency is going to impact everybody. And in that younger age range, the males also were 41% of them being deficient in iron. So this again is just a bigger picture and a bigger problem than sometimes it may seem. And if we're not testing, we have no idea that this is actually occurring. So this is really just to be able to not scare anyone, but more so to highlight and emphasize the impact and the importance of making sure that we do our own blood work regularly, that we go and get checked up, that we do assess all these different things. And for soccer players in particular, it's a little bit of kind of like a perfect storm as to why those iron levels may be a little bit lower. And so here are kind of like 6 of the main things. And number 1 being for female athletes in particular, regular, as you're going through your cycle and you have your period, the monthly blood loss. Iron is going to be a part of blood, and the more blood that we lose, the more iron we lose. So yeah, if we're having our period, which we should be, we're going to lose some iron. And if we're not mindful of that to replace that, we're going to be struggling. The other aspect that's impacting the iron levels is just in general the red blood cell breakdown. Iron is contained within red blood cells, and those blood cells can get broken down when our feet are hitting the ground. It's called foot strike hemolysis. Big word, basically means every time your foot's doing a pounding, it's kind of breaking some of the red blood cells. And when those break, the iron gets lost. And so naturally in soccer, when you're running, you're playing, you're performing, you're doing quite a bit of pounding. And especially if you're on turf and it's going to be a bit harder than grass, it's going to break things down even more. And so just that natural aspect of things is going to increase the chances of the iron levels being a little bit lower. Another aspect is when we sweat, we lose all sorts of electrolytes, sodium being the main one and the primary focus, as it should be. But there is a little bit of iron that can be lost in that. Not astronomical, but a little bit. And this goes then to say, if you are sweating a lot, if you're a very sweaty athlete, or if you're just doing a lot of training and in general it results in a lot of sweat loss, even though it is a relatively small amount of iron that's lost, if you do lose a lot of sweat, it could result in a relevant and significantly impactful amount of iron that is lost. So it's just one thing to be mindful of. The other thing is that when you put your body into that level of physical exertion and you really do some high intense training and you just kind of push your body, that intensity is going to block the absorption of iron. When you put your body through those rigorous training sessions, it creates some inflammation and it creates an environment where the body's not able to absorb the iron as well. That intense training is also going to impact your gut, and that impact is going to inhibit iron being able to get in and sometimes iron actually being lost. And so just that damage that occurs to the body in a big picture good way, where training is going to be great, it's very important, but the way the body adapts and gets better is because we do kind of break it down in the short term. Part of that breakdown can cause a little bit of iron loss, so we need to make sure of that. And then the other aspect is just in general, if we're not eating enough, if we are underfueling the body as a whole, we're just not consuming most likely enough iron and or the complementary pieces to enhance that absorption. And again, just making sure that the body's in an environment to do everything that we're asking it to do, to keep the body well fueled, to keep the overall physiological stress of things down a little bit. And then also we're just consuming iron-rich foods and making sure we're able to absorb it optimally. And so when it comes to eating iron-rich foods, one thing to be mindful of is that you could be eating those high iron containing foods, but still be losing a little bit of ground to where it's not actually able to get your iron levels up enough. And it comes back to some of those factors that we were discussing that can inhibit the absorption. The biggest one being those hard training sessions. That blockage of iron absorption continues to climb and enhance, and it really peaks about 3 to 6 hours afterwards. When that is occurring, if we are consuming, say, any red meat or anything that contains iron, the body's working against that towards decreasing the absorption. So the training is important, but we need to be mindful that it can impact how much iron we're able to take up. As a result, during that time period, 36% is how much less of iron can be absorbed during that window. Yeah, everyone's going to be a little bit different, and it's impacted by what complementary foods you're having with it. But the moral of the story is, at the end of training, your body's going to be struggling the rest of the day to kind of absorb that iron. And all of that compounded over an entire season, if we're not mindful and careful, can really result in an overall iron deficiency and then having that cascade of negative effects occur, both physically, performance-wise, cognitively, and everything in between. And so when it comes to evaluating this and keeping an eye on, well, what are my iron levels? What is my iron like? You need to be mindful about what actually you're testing. When you go and get the blood work, there's a bunch of different types of iron markers that you can really look at. But there's two primary ones to be mindful of. There, again, are going to be multiple others that can really dive a little bit deeper if needed, but there's two main ones that I want you to be mindful of. The first one is hemoglobin. This is going to be the primary one that gets reviewed on most generic annual blood tests. This is the one that's going to be able to more so assess, are you in an anemic state? Are you fully iron deficient? It's kind of like a yes, no type of a thing. It's at the end of the stage. It doesn't help raise a flag. It doesn't help draw attention to, hey, we may have some anemia developing here. It just tells us straight up that we're there, because it takes a while for that hemoglobin number to change and to adapt. It's not as acute and immediate. To be able to be more proactive, we want to look at the ferritin levels. Your ferritin is going to be a little bit more sensitive and impact and fluctuate in a little bit more of a timely manner to be able to indicate, are we approaching iron deficiency? Is the body trending in that way? And do we need to act upon that? So by asking for your ferritin levels and getting that checked, you're going to be able to pick up and catch on that iron deficiency, or at least the trend of that earlier, to hopefully avoid that anemic state ever occurring or ever popping up. This is always going to be the goal. We want to be proactive in any way, shape, and form that we can to avoid being reactive. Nobody enjoys being reactive. It's like, oh, this is bad. Now we need to react to it. If we can avoid the bad aspect altogether, why not? This is a way to be able to do that. But it isn't always going to be a part of that standard blood test. It's starting to trend that way, I would say, but it's not guaranteed. So next time that you're going in to get your blood work done, just double check. It's a quick question. It's a quick ask to be like, hey, are you checking the ferritin levels as well? And if not, can we toss that in there? What it's going to cost you is your performance. Because again, if we don't get the ferritin levels to be able to assess all of that, we're just kind of like assuming that we're in a good spot. But if we don't notice it, we're going to be costing the performance. We're going to have a decreased aerobic capacity, because again, that oxygen is really going to fuel the body's ability to run, to sprint, to regenerate the energy to do all those things. So the aerobic capacity is going to drop. And as a soccer player, that's not great. And it's going to be fairly noticeable. It's going to be a 3 to 4% drop in endurance performance. This may not seem like a lot, but you will absolutely notice it. You're not going to enjoy that. And even more so, you're likely going to notice it in your sprint recovery. You're not going to reach those high power outputs. You're not going to be as fast as you used to be. You're going to react a little bit slower. Just in general, the game is going to feel tougher and it's going to be frustrating. So that's what we want to be able to address, catch early to avoid that from popping up. Because if we do happen to get to an iron deficiency, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. We can bring it back up. But once we go from being deficient back to an optimal range, this is where those numbers become even more pronounced. That upside is significant. Aerobic capacity has been shown to increase 6 to 15%, depending on how deficient the individual, and the overall endurance performance can improve from 2 to 20% on what different studies have shown. So again, the numbers aren't necessarily important as much as it is the overall message. If we're deficient in iron, we need to get it up to improve and enhance our performance so we can do what we do best. If we are able to catch it before we're deficient, we can still make sure that we avoid that kind of in-between period performance dip. So what I want you to be mindful of and what I really want you to kind of write down is straight up the word ferritin. I want to make sure that the next time you're going into your doctor's visit or getting that blood draw, you just ask, is ferritin being tested? If not, can we get it tested? And what we want to be mindful of too is making sure that when we are reviewing these numbers, that we don't necessarily just look at it at surface value. Ask a deeper question, ask for the follow-up question, because the standard lab ranges are going to be built around a general population. As an athlete, you are not necessarily a general individual. Your body is going to be responding differently, and therefore your numbers are likely going to be different as well. Not only in what it shows on the paper, but also what numbers you're trying to achieve to be performing optimally. And so we need to make sure that not only are we reading those values appropriately, but we also want to make sure that when we go and get these blood works and lab work drawn, that we're transparent with the doctor of when did you train last? How intense was it? How hydrated are you going into it? Because all these things are going to impact the numbers that appear on that report. Iron can be one of them as well. So it's just making sure that the whole picture is articulated every time that you go and get that blood work done. Now, when it comes to overall food sources, not all iron-containing foods are going to be absorbed the same way. Animal products that contain iron are going to be absorbed a whole lot better than plant sources are going to be. And so the primary source of that iron is really going to be red meat. There's going to be a little bit of iron in kind of overall animal products across the board, but it really is that red meat piece that's going to be key. So the beef component is going to be essentially your number one source of iron. Yes, you can still get it from other sources and things like that, but your heaviest hitter is going to be beef. And so with that, the body is just more optimally able to absorb that, to take that up and take it in. Plant sources of iron, while on paper, and if you look on those nutrition facts, being like, oh, hey, it contains X percentage of my daily needed iron, while on paper it shows that the body's not able to absorb it. Because what a lot of plants contain within them actually inhibit the body's ability to absorb that iron. So you just want to be mindful and aware that if we're consuming and relying predominantly on plant sources for iron, that we may actually need to consume more of it to offset that inhibited absorption. Now, there are some ways to be able to enhance that absorption, but this is going to be essentially the big message. Animal products are going to provide more iron than plant sources. So if you are a vegetarian or a vegan athlete, I can't emphasize enough the importance of going and getting your iron levels checked. Because not only are you consuming lower bioavailable sources of iron, you're consuming a lot of additional foods that can inhibit the absorption of that iron. So there's a whole lot of factors at play, potentially impacting and limiting the iron levels within your body. So you want to make sure that you're staying on top of that. And while plants are absolutely fantastic and great, we want to consume them. We need to be mindful about what that can impact from an iron absorption standpoint, especially if you go and get your blood work done and you're in a situation or a scenario where we're actively trying to increase it. We want to be mindful of that. So to take it a step further, to help enhance the absorption of that iron, vitamin C is going to be one of the biggest things that you're going to want to be consuming along with it. The vitamin C is what's going to really enhance that uptake within the body, and you can get that vitamin C however your heart desires. Citrus fruits tend to be the main thing and what kind of comes to everybody's mind first, like, oh, if I pair it with some fruit, I'll be able to get that in. You can also get it from things like tomatoes and bell peppers. The moral of the story is, if we really need to make sure that we're getting our iron up, having some vitamin C along for the ride is going to enhance that. Now, the bigger list of things that we want to try to limit and kind of keep away from our iron sources to avoid inhibiting the absorption are going to be kind of a lot of things that are fairly commonplace. One of the big ones being coffee and tea. The compounds within coffee and tea are really going to inhibit that absorption, even 1 to 2 hours after consuming it. So we want to make sure that we are just separating all of that out. And if anyone happens to be on an iron supplement, I would say most individuals consume their supplements in the morning. Most individuals also consume some coffee in the morning. And if those two things are overlapping, you're not getting the biggest return on your investment, and you're kind of slowing the progress and the results of what you're hoping to get from that supplement in and of itself. So be mindful of that. The other thing is calcium containing foods. Dairy products naturally are going to be the biggest source of that calcium. calcium is really going to block that iron. So if we are consuming any iron-rich containing foods, be mindful if there is some cheese along with that, if there is any dairy products, or if we're taking an iron supplement, if we also are needing a calcium supplement, really try to split those up. Take those at separate different times to avoid kind of battling one another. So this is where kind of some of the plant-based iron sources comes into play, to where if some of those plant sources do contain iron, but we know that it's also not going to be the most bioavailable, we really just want to be overly mindful that we're pairing them up with something that will enhance that iron. So spinach being an example. Yeah, it's got some iron in there, but because of everything else going on, we really want to make sure that we've got some vitamin C along with it to maximize the uptake of that iron. So if we're having a spinach salad, if we throw some berries on top of that, beautiful. That's just going to be able to not only provide some extra antioxidants and some extra benefit, it's going to allow the body to enhance the uptake of the iron within that. So kind of the when and how. Now, if we kind of take a step back, review everything and look at that big picture, if needing to really focus on your iron, if you get that tested and it's a little bit low and we need to work on increasing it, the timing of your intake is going to be huge. Earlier in the day, 9 times out of 10 is going to be the most optimal for it. Because as the day goes on, just naturally, the way the body responds internally and physiologically, the body naturally is starting to produce certain compounds that block and inhibit that iron absorption. So if we catch it in the morning, before that has started to really build in the system, we're going to be able to enhance that absorption and get the most out of that. So early in the day tends to be the best. Later in the day, the body's kind of starting to work against that. And so if supplementation is needed though, this is one of those things that you don't want to just take over the counter and take it as a blanket supplement of like, yeah, I heard all these benefits about iron. I'm just going to take some to be careful. You don't want to do that, because this absolutely falls into the category of you can't have too much of a good thing. And iron is something that the body is going to hold on to a little bit more of. And if we consume too much and that iron gets too high, that's going to be causing some problems on its own as well. So we really want to make sure that we do that blood work, that we get those labs done to be able to accurately assess and know, where are we at right now? Is supplementation needed at all? And if so, let's try to get it in the morning. Let's take it away from any calcium containing foods. Let's pair it with some vitamin C. Try not to do it after exercise too long, and give it time to be able to work its magic. We don't want to provide too much too quick. And also, we just want to be able to see, can it also increase from food alone? If we don't need a supplement, if we're just slightly lower, maybe we just need to be a little bit more mindful of the food that we're consuming. Do we need to make sure that we've got a couple servings of beef per week to get that iron in? And not only that, but ensuring that the beef doesn't have a side of anything containing cheese or dairy, and that we've also got some good vitamin C sources paired up with it. Again, it's just getting that blood work done first and foremost to assess where are we at, and then do the game plan of what needs to be addressed. What are the action steps to be able to get that level back up? One thing that I would really kind of challenge you for and encourage is just to go and get your ferritin checked. If it's been a long time since you've done any blood work, one, just get the full workup, man. Go get all that assessed, get it reviewed, see where you stand on everything, but especially check the iron levels. Hemoglobin's going to be great to know as well. We want to be proactive, and ferritin's going to be able to help with that. So again, big takeaway, get your blood work done, see what your numbers are at to be able to evaluate, do I need to be proactive? Is there something I can do to help avoid something creeping up that's going to inhibit your performance?